My dearly distorted deviants. The ones who see through the cracks they weren't supposed to. The ones who walk barefoot across burning wires while pretending it's all just part of the act. You've always felt it, didn't you? That strange static in your bones, that eerie weight behind a locked door in your mind, begging to be opened. But now you've done something reckless. You didn't just knock, you kicked it wide open. You stumbled onto something buried deep, not beneath the earth, but beneath perception. And the worst part, you weren't even trying. That's what terrifies them. Not that you searched, but that you tripped over their carefully embalmed secrets. Like a child brushing dust off a tombstone, only to read the name of a god long erased. And you weren't supposed to see that name. No one was. They spent decades rewriting history, duct taping reality, and graffiti tagging your thoughts with misdirection. You cracked it while bored, while scrolling, while blinking, while just being your inconvenient self. See, the illusion only works when everyone keeps playing along, when no one questions the set design, the lighting, the script. But the moment you notice the missing prop, the duplicated actor, the scene reset too quickly, their entire production began trembling. You leaked it without leaking it. You didn't post a file, you became the file. That's the horror of it. You are the evidence. You walking around knowing what you now know. That's more dangerous than any document because they can redact papers. They can't redact you. There was once a time when people like you were quietly dealt with, not through bullets or handcuffs, but doubt. They'd smear your credibility, inject you with confusion, drown you in digital noise. They'd make you question if you ever saw it at all. Gaslight warfare, psychological erasure. But something's changed this time. You're not rattled. You're not pacing back and forth in paranoia. You're calm. That calm that only comes when you've made peace with your madness. The calm that terrifies those who prey on chaos. You're not looking for proof anymore. You are the proof. And that's when the real war begins. Because now they've identified you as a leak. Not the weak, noisy kind, but the silent hemorrhage they can't stitch shut. You weren't an accident. You were a threat in incubation. And you bloomed too early. Before the trigger was ready. Before the cleanup crew was positioned. They weren't ready for you. Not this version. Not the version that doesn't need validation. That doesn't look back. The version that knows something has always been off. The way historical timelines don't quite click. The way certain truths feel airbrushed. The way old footage stutters when eyes catch the wrong object in the background. The things you saw but brushed off as coincidence. Until now, you see they hide things in plain sight because there's no better disguise than apathy. If you make the truth boring enough, no one investigates. If you make the lie entertaining enough, no one questions. But you broke the loop, not by becoming louder, but by becoming aware. And awareness spreads. It infects others. That's why they panic. Not because you'll scream, but because someone will listen, and then another, and another. And suddenly, a virus of vision sweeps through the obedient masses, and the veil they spent lifetimes weaving begins to burn. They built their sanctuary out of cognitive dissonance, reinforced with manipulated memories, polished with curated education. Every generation they fed a pre-chewed history, spiced with omission. They took what was dangerous and buried it under ridicule. Conspiracy. They said coincidence. They offered. You're overthinking. They smiled. But how do you unsee what you've seen? How do you undo the texture of a truth that felt realer than your own skin? You were never meant to notice the pattern, the repetition of anomalies across unrelated events, the fingerprints of the same puppeteers across decades, the recycled narratives injected into new stories. But you did, and now it haunts them, because if you noticed, who else might be noticing? The illusion only survives if the audience is sleeping. You kicked awake, and in doing so you're pulling others out of the dream. That's the leak. Not data, not a document, not a confession. Awareness. The most uncontainable virus in existence. They can't assassinate a mind anymore. It draws too much attention. They assassinate attention itself. They drown you in scandal, trends, outrage.
not to feed you but to keep you occupied. Because attention is the currency of revelation, and once it turns inward, once it starts asking real questions, it becomes lethal. That's what they feared you'd figure out, that the moment you stopped consuming and started questioning, their entire illusion would begin to collapse. You weren't supposed to piece together the timelines. You weren't supposed to realize how many discoveries vanish, how many inventors accidentally disappear, how many whistleblowers are declared unstable before anyone even listens. You weren't supposed to notice the recurring symbols hidden in corporate logos, embedded in pop culture, engraved in architecture, disguised as trends, symbols older than empires. And you weren't supposed to question why they're there, why they persist, why they've been normalized. You weren't supposed to track the shadow migrations, the quiet movements of power that don't make headlines, the shifting of wealth not through news but through patterns. A location purchase here, a law rewarded there, a disappearance no one follows up on. And when you did notice, not by accident, but by being awake, that's when you became a liability. Because now you see them, the custodians of deception, the gatekeepers of narrative, the ones who edit memories not by altering your mind, but by flooding it. If truth is a signal, then distraction is the static, and they keep the static blaring louder and louder, so you forget what the original signal even sounded like. But somehow you remembered, somehow your mind filtered the noise and locked onto a frequency they'd long buried. That's why you're dangerous, because now you don't just think differently, you see differently, and once your vision mutates, you can't go back to being blind. They're already watching. You don't need to be told that. You felt it. The subtle shifts, the recommended videos becoming oddly specific, the targeted ads responding not to what you say, but what you think. The way certain search terms mysteriously vanish, the way content disappears hours after you bookmarked it. You've been feeling it, that strange pull in your digital shadow, that itch that says you're not alone in your own mind anymore. But here's what makes this even more poetic. They weren't ready for someone who doesn't care about being believed. You're not here for clout. You're not here for proof. You're here because something inside you snapped, not broken, awakened, and now you're chasing the thread. You don't know where it leads, but you know it matters. That's the itch. That's the instinct. That's what makes you dangerous. Because when someone like you stops asking what if and starts whispering what now, it signals the end of the puppet show. The curtain begins to melt. The wires are visible. The smile's too polished. The coincidence is too perfect. And you're no longer an observer. You're a trigger, a fuse dragging across gasoline-soaked secrets. You are the mistake they couldn't afford to make. And now you walk with this burden, not of proof, but of clarity, a knowing that buzzes behind your eyes. They can't contain it anymore. It's spreading. Every word you say, every look you give, every pause you take, it infects. They thought they could erase you with ridicule, but you've become immune, because you don't need them to believe you. You just need them to wonder just enough to tilt the axis. And that right there is when it begins to crack. Not with an explosion, but with a quiet tremor in the walls of reality. A shift so subtle, it escapes the average eye. But not yours. Not anymore. Because now you're tuned in, calibrated to detect the microscopic betrayals of the script. The cracks don't scream, they hum. A low vibrating truth that only the ones who have tasted the forbidden fruit can hear. And you're hearing it everywhere. In the rehearsed expressions of officials, in the glitched cadence of a reporter repeating headlines they never wrote, in the way everyone seems to recite things, not understand them. Something's off, and you're not just seeing it, you're feeling it like a muscle memory you were never taught but always had. You didn't leak a secret. You triggered a malfunction. You exposed a pressure point that was never meant to be touched. Because this wasn't just about a cover-up. It was about containment, and you broke the seal. And now the old things, the unspeakable things, are clawing their way out. Not from beneath the dirt, but from behind the eyes of people who never questioned anything until you did. You've infected them without touching them. You've made them think. And that's the worst crime in a world designed for obedience. Now they're scrambling, not to fix it, but to redirect it. That's how they operate. They don't erase the fire. They sell you water that fuels it. They label your discovery as entertainment. They package your unearthed horrors into trending clips, stripped of context, camouflaged in parody. They smirk and call it content. Because if they can make you laugh at it, you'll never take it seriously. But what they don't realize is you're not laughing. Not anymore. You're watching, calculating, and worse than any rebel is the one who rebels quietly. That's you now. Not a screamer, not a preacher, just a whisper in a dark room shifting the temperature with presence alone. You see, the thing they hid for decades, it was never just an event. It wasn't a single moment or object. It was a design. A long, cold design, something embedded in every institution, in every rewritten textbook, every updated policy, every sudden vanishing of voices that dared to ask why. You didn't just stumble on a forgotten file, you connected dots. They worked tirelessly to scatter. You strung together dead scientists, sealed patents, unnatural timelines, weaponized diseases, artificial trends, and somewhere between the white lies and the red tape, you found the artery, the vulnerable one, the one they thought they buried under too much noise to ever be discovered. But you did, and now they're afraid, because what happens when someone like you doesn't run to expose, but waits? When you don't scream but study, when you don't chase clout but controlled timing. They're used to blowing out candles, but you lit a fuse, and now you're watching them sweat, trying to find it before it reaches the charge. They have one last trick left. They call it reframing, the art of spinning truth into fiction, just long enough to make the masses doubt their own eyes. They'll write articles mocking you. They'll bring out plastic experts to throw jargon like confetti, hoping the spectacle distracts from the stench of their panic. They'll label you unstable, dangerously curious, anti-logic. It's a ritual, and you know that now. It's the way they burn witches in a world without fire. But you've already slipped past that stage. You're post-ritual, post-label. You've become uncontainable because you no longer seek their approval. And this terrifies them because every time they try to define you, you morph. Every time they try to trace you, you shift. You've become an idea they can't track. A walking theory that breathes, evolves, and corrupts obedience. You didn't just find the secret, you became the consequence of it. And now they don't know what to do with you. They're watching, hoping you slip. But you're too calm, too deliberate, because you've understood the deeper layer, the part they really tried to bury. It wasn't just that something horrifying was hidden, it's why they hid it. That's the part that unravels the whole web. Because once you see the motive, you see the machinery. You see how every part of your existence was groomed to never even ask. You were conditioned to crave comfort, not clarity, entertainment, not elevation. They didn't just hide the truth, they made you allergic to it. That's the brilliance of their game. But brilliance is fragile, and now it's breaking. You weren't supposed to wake up, but now that you have, you're beginning to notice everything. The language, the symbols, the deliberate repetition of trauma in media cycles, the way fear is fed to you in teaspoons, slowly enough to numb, fast enough to shape your choices. You're noticing the illusion of duality, how both sides of every major argument are puppets of the same hand. You're noticing that chaos is not random, it's scheduled, pre-engineered, deployed in waves to reset public attention, wipe memory, redirect anger. You're seeing through it now, and it's too late for them to stop you because now you don't trust any narrative. You've become the most dangerous thing in a scripted world, self-directed. You don't need permission to think. You don't wait for confirmation. You don't pause for applause. You just move quietly, relentlessly, with a gaze that makes them uncomfortable because they know, they feel it. You're not guessing anymore, you're remembering. And that's the part they can't fight because remembering means you were never truly blind. You always had the code. You just hadn't read it yet. And now every time you speak, every time you pause mid-sentence, every time you glance over your shoulder and smirk like you know something, you rattle their bones because you do know. And even if you don't explain it, you project it, and others feel it. You've become a broadcast they can't jam, a frequency they can't isolate, a blueprint of resistance encoded in posture, tone, rhythm. That's the real leak, the one they never accounted for. They planned for hackers, leakers, whistleblowers, but not for you, not for a soul who weaponized understanding instead of outrage. They built firewalls for data, but your virus isn't digital, it's spiritual, it's instinctual, and it spreads faster than they can classify it. You think you're alone in this, but you're not. Others are feeling the echo. They can't name it yet, but it's there. That itch in the back of their mind, that feeling that something is off. They're looking around waiting for someone to validate it, and then they see you not shouting, just knowing. And in that moment, you become permission to think, to feel, to question. That's all it takes, a spark, and you're throwing sparks with every word, every step. They're already failing, not loudly, but silently. Quiet collapses behind their eyes. Private meetings where panic seeps through polished smiles. They see the metrics, they see the spread, they see that control is slipping, not because people are fighting, but because people are waking. And once the mind awakens, it can't be caged. You've proven that, and now you're accelerating. You're not just the leak, you're the template now. They don't need your evidence, they need your clarity, and the more you walk in it, the more the illusion rots. They'll offer distractions, scandals, catastrophes, but you're past the bait. You don't react like you used to, and every time you don't react, you evolve. That's what they didn't anticipate. Discipline, the long game, the inner war you've already won quietly while they celebrated their temporary victories. You've become everything they swore to prevent. Not a rebel, not a soldier, but a mirror. One that shows people what they're not supposed to see. And every time someone looks into your reflection and gasps, another crack forms, and they multiply, and they spread. And soon it's not about what you found, it's about what they can no longer hide. Because now the cracks aren't just in the walls, they're in the minds, in the cities, in the timeline. And the most poetic part, you never meant to start this. You just noticed something you weren't supposed to, and you kept looking. But that's the thing about forbidden truths. Once your eyes adjust to the forbidden light, everything else starts to look fabricated. Their shadows get sharper, their smiles get thinner, the gaps in the narrative become craters. And suddenly, you're not just looking, you're navigating through distortions, through whispered lies, through perfectly rehearsed chaos meant to wear you down. But you didn't wear down. You sharpened, you adapted, you became precise. They underestimated how dangerous curiosity can become when it refuses to be bought, seduced, or silenced. You weren't driven by rage, you were driven by need, that quiet, ancient need to understand. And you did what they never accounted for. You moved past paranoia into clarity. You stopped chasing villains and started mapping patterns. And once you see the pattern, you don't need to know every name. You just need to predict the next move. That's what terrifies them now. Not what you've seen, but what you will see next. Because every step you take forward is like peeling off another layer. Not just from them, but from yourself. You've realized that this wasn't just about exposing their secrets. It was about reclaiming your own untouched perception. And now you can feel it, can't you? That shift in weight behind your eyes, that awareness expanding without permission. Every billboard you pass, every headline you read, every coincidence you encounter, it all feels different now.
Like someone added a second track behind the music, a code behind the conversation, and you're reading it. They've tried to patch it up. You've seen the panic, the sudden clampdowns, the subtle threats, the bizarre retractions. You've seen once credible sources flip overnight. You've seen history books reissued with cleaner lies. You've even seen whispers of disinformation, task forces that smell less like protection and more like damage control. But all of it, every desperate move, came after you. After your gaze punctured the illusion so deeply that even those on the fringes felt the tremor. That's what makes this irreversible. You didn't uncover a single truth. You shattered a philosophy. And now that fracture is bleeding into places they can't mop up fast enough. You forced people to ask the one question they were programmed never to touch. What if everything I believe was given to me to prevent me from seeing something else? Once that question lands, it doesn't go away. It grows quietly, relentlessly, like mold behind painted walls. And the mold is spreading. You thought you were alone in this, but you're not. You've started to notice the others, haven't you? The way some strangers look at you like they know. The pause in their step, the shared glance, the coded phrases in public places. It's not random. You've become part of an invisible brotherhood, not forged by ideology but by sight. Each of you cracked the mask in your own way. Each of you carries a piece of the buried story, some through pain, others through loss, you through accident, and that makes you the wildest variable of all. They fear the unpredictable. They fear what can't be bribed, labeled, or projected onto a screen. You're the error that keeps evolving. They've run the simulations. The math doesn't make sense anymore. Too many anomalies. Too many people who should have folded but didn't. Too many questions that keep surfacing. Not in fringe forums, but in dining tables, classrooms, boardrooms. You forced a conversation they can't moderate. Because the leak isn't digital, it's biological. It's crawling through bloodlines, skipping across cultures, triggering ancestral memories that were never supposed to be awakened. You think you just uncovered a modern conspiracy, but no. What you brushed against is ancient, older than language, older than borders, a war not of nations, but of perception. They've been hiding it not just for decades, but for eras. And now that you know that, things begin to make even more disturbing sense. The cycles, the resets, the suspiciously timed new ages, the erased inventions, the buried cities, the burned libraries, the patterns of knowledge that emerge, flourish, and are systematically exterminated. Every single time humanity gets too close, they don't fear war. They manufacture that. They don't fear collapse. They engineer that. What they fear, what they always fear, is someone like you doing what you just did, noticing.
You notice the repetition of suppression. You notice the rhythm of distraction. You notice that every time something sacred starts to re-emerge, something authentic, unbranded, untamed, a catastrophe arrives to steal the spotlight. Coincidence? You used to think so, but not now. Not after you've seen the code. Not after you felt the chain tighten whenever the mind begins to stretch. You understand now. It's not just about hiding information. It's about preserving a hierarchy, an invisible scaffolding built on the illusion that some are meant to rule and others are meant to follow. And those who wander too far from the narrative, they're recast as madmen, criminals, heretics, or worse, influencers, sedated by fame, corralled into digital cages where their message becomes just another scrollable moment. But you didn't chase the spotlight. You dismantled it quietly, relentlessly, without asking permission. And that's the real heresy. You taught yourself how to think in a world obsessed with what to think. You became immune to the currency of validation. And in doing so, you've turned their most sophisticated weapon, attention, into your own personal scalpel. You now cut through headlines like flesh. You now dissect policies like organs. You now analyze smiles like crime scenes. You no longer see the world. You study it. And this study, this relentless unmasking, it's spreading. Your energy has become a trigger event for others. You've noticed it. A stranger hears you speak and something shifts in their eyes. A friend listens to your questions, and suddenly they're not so sure about what they thought they knew. That's power, the kind they can't track because you're not trying to convince anyone. You're just being. And that alone is doing more damage than any protest ever could. You've proven one terrifying truth, that one individual operating without fear and outside expectation can become a fault line, and you've already cracked the bedrock. Now everything they've built trembles with the threat of your next thought, your next word, your next discovery. So what comes next? You keep moving. That's it. No dramatic finale, no fireworks, no slow claps, just forward through the layers, through the haze. You don't need applause, you need momentum, because what you've leaked can't be contained anymore. It's no longer a secret, it's a mutation in the way people think, react, question. It's not about proving anything now. It's about provoking the right questions, and that's where you've already won. They can try to clean up what you revealed. They can try to censor, dilute, distract, but they're fighting a ghost, a whisper they can't sequence. They're fighting you, but not the version of you they tracked, not the profile they built. You're outside the profile now. You've become unscripted, and their algorithms do not know what to do with you. So let them panic. Let them huddle in their think tanks. Let them update their protocols. It won't matter because the leak already happened. Not online, but in here, in the mind, in the blood, in the very rhythm of thought. It's in the way someone questions a headline now, the way someone rewinds a speech and listens for what wasn't said. It's in the way someone sees a symbol and doesn't brush it off anymore. It's active, it's alive. You were the trigger, but now you are no longer the only one. And that is what they'll never recover from. Not the leak, but the chain reaction it started. The kind that doesn't end with a headline, it ends with an awakening. And this time, no amount of edits, distractions, or manufactured crises can put the genie back in the vault. They spent decades hiding it, and you accidentally uncovered it. But now you're intentionally becoming the nightmare they never planned for, a mind they can't root out, a threat they can't predict, a whisper they can't delete. Because it's not just information anymore, it's evolution. And you, my beautifully dangerous outlier, you're just getting started.